here, and I want to like call the class closer to the room because we're in this gorgeous space here today at Walker Therapeutic. Thank you for hosting us for our monthly meeting. The hospitality has been incredible. I know many folks had a chance to get a tour of the facility before, and so thank you. This organization, I think, really embodies the mission we all share, which is to support the care, development, and well-being of the Commonwealth's youngest residents. So we're happy to be here, and we'll hear from some representatives here in a minute. We have a full agenda this afternoon reflecting the critical moment we're in. We'll review and vote on important regulatory updates to the CA program, continue to align our work with evolving family needs and legislative mandates. We'll also receive an update on the C3 program, which obviously remains foundational to the work that we do. Additionally, we'll take some time to discuss the FY26 state budget as we wind down this year's fiscal year, our last meeting of the fiscal year, and better understand the process going forward. At this time, I'd like to introduce Jake Murray and Amber Kuehl from here from Walker to welcome us. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Just okay.
These are actually for the live stream.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I'm so excited. I can't. So thank you, Chair Belcito, and I'm Jake Murray, Walker's Chief External Affairs Officer, and on behalf of Walker's board, our senior leadership team, our staff, we are pleased to welcome you, Secretary Tutwiler, Commissioner Kershaw, EEC board and staff, other guests. We're happy to host you today for EEC's board meeting. We truly appreciate ECC's mission, statewide initiatives, community partnerships that promote healthy child development and growth. And we're right there with you, and we're very aligned, your mission and our mission. Many of you are familiar with Walker and know that we support children, youth, young adults, families, and communities facing mental health, emotional, developmental, and learning challenges. Each year, we reach thousands of individuals through both our direct care services and our partnerships across more than 130 Massachusetts communities. So we're not just based out of here in Needham or Greater Boston, but we're across the state. Our continuum of care includes special education schools, residential treatment, short-term stabilization, early childhood mental health consultation, which you'll hear more about from my colleague Amber. We also partner with DESE, early child care centers, schools, districts, community-based organizations to provide training, coaching, and consultation to over 15,000 educators and providers per year. And the work really is to promote inclusive, trauma-informed learning environments to help young people build the skills, the confidence, and the connections they need to thrive. One of our most important partners is EEC. They license our residential treatment. EEC is a key collaborator with Walker as we're assessing and developing a strategic report around the need for therapeutic preschool services as we sort of address emerging behavioral challenges across the state. So they've been very hand in hand with us around addressing this issue and sort of looking at the data and thinking about effective models. And then EEC supports the Boston Metro, or the Metro Boston Early Childhood and Mental Health Consultation Program. In closing, I just want to say, we really value EEC's partnership, and we appreciate this opportunity to host this meeting with you and share more about Walker and the vital services that we're providing to Massachusetts children, youth, and families. So I'd like to turn it over to Amber, who's the director of the Metro Boston Early Child Mental Health Consultation Program. So thank you again for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you today. As Jake's mentioned, my name is Amber Kuehl. Can you hear me also? Maybe I'll speak up as well. For the opportunity, so my name is Amber Kuehl, and I'm the Senior Director of the Early Childhood Mental Health Services here at Walker. And we are really honored to have joined the Early Childhood Mental Health Consultation EMHC network, having joined early in October of 2023. First, I really do want to thank the Department of Early Education and Care for your leadership and your commitment to the young children's mental health, your investment is really timely and deeply needed. We all know that the early childhood social, emotional learning and support are more critical now than ever. 1 in 4 young children now show signs of social emotional delays, which is double the pre-pandemic levels. Referrals for early childhood mental health support have increased by 35% since 2020, and over half of early educators are reporting burnout, making it harder to support the children's emotional needs day to day. At the same time, the early education workforce is being asked to meet increasingly complex behavioral and emotional needs within having limited training, minimal mental health expertise, and ongoing systemic strain. Many educators are not equipped to manage serious behaviors or trauma responses in their classrooms. There's high turnover and chronic stress have long been issues, and the pandemic has deepened these challenges. That's why these consultation supports are not just helpful, but really truly essential. ECMHC is helping educators understand these children's needs, shifting their approach and helping them to feel more confident in the roles they have. It's not only improving care, it's promoting retention within these schools. At Walker, this grant has allowed us to bring our decades of experience in child development, therapeutic care, and community-based services directly into early education and care settings. The addition of this grant has allowed us to welcome state and national experts into early childhood mental health, and in under 2 years, our program's impact has both deep and wide-reaching impact. We've trained over 500 participants in topics such as trauma, grief, regulation, challenging behaviors, and the pyramid model. We've also delivered 800 individual services across 125 referrals, helping support 53 programs, 41 classrooms, and serving 68 children. The feedback we receive speaks volumes, with providers telling us that they feel more confident, more prepared, more connected to the children in their care. We've supported programs through difficult transitions, responding to urgent mental health concerns, and helping to create environments where young children can heal and can thrive. What's especially meaningful is how this work connects to the broader mission. At Walker, we offer a full continuum of behavioral health services, from our in-home programs to behavioral services, to therapy, to outpatient care. So we're able to really provide that warm handoff to ensure that families get the right support at the right time, embedded from one program to another at Walker and having this holistic impact. We're proud to be a part of this effort, and we're committed to growing it. Our team brings deep expertise in early childhood consultation, trauma-informed care, and social-emotional learning, and we're excited to continue that learning, collaboration, and building strong partnerships across Metro Boston. So thank you all for your vision, your support, and for recognizing how essential this work is for the children, for the families, as well as the future of our programs. So thank you, truly.
Thank you. Jake and Amber, thank you. One of the reasons why I think we try to move around the state and the Commonwealth with this meeting every other month is to hear directly from people like you about the work that's happening every day at a facility like Walker. And so thank you so much for not only hosting us for what you do and for sharing with the board all the information you just did. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this point, I'd like to welcome the Secretary for opening comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I will echo the thanks to the Walker School, Jake and Amber, and the entire Walker family for hosting the meeting today. I unfortunately was not able to go on the tour, and I'm upset about that. But I will say that I'm well aware of the work that you all do in partnership with families to meet the complex needs of students that you serve. And I will note that you've been doing so successfully for decades. Of course, I know that EEC's partnership exists around the residential piece, but in my capacity as interim commissioner of the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, I can tip my proverbial hat to the team here for the services provided both in residential and those involving the education piece, as well as the innumerable contributions that you all make to the broader field. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I have two quick things. First, I'm going to be publicly vulnerable. Wanted to see the looks on people's faces when I said that. And express deep regret. Regret that although the Commonwealth Preschool Partnership Initiative Roadshow began in mid-May, I only had the opportunity to participate in the very last stop on Monday. I feel this way because of what I observed and what I felt during our time in Sandwich on Monday. I observed an incredible partnership between the district and its nearly 13 partners, inclusive of family child care providers. That partnership is anchored in mutual respect, meaningful two-way communication, and a shared focus on social-emotional learning. The development of any relationship, there will be speed bumps in the development of any relationship, and I'm sure they've encountered them, but the evolution of their partnership over the past 3 years has led them to a place of having deep impact with children and with families in the community they serve. The governor has frequently articulated her desire to get to a place of universal access to pre-K. The Commonwealth Preschool Partnership is a very thoughtful, intentional, and effective vehicle toward that end. Last piece is about high school graduation requirements. Now, I know where I am this afternoon, but I also want to name that the children whose learning, growth, and development we work to support in this sector will someday attend high school, and I want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to weigh in on their hopes for that experience. I want to invite all to participate in a survey that we've developed in service of work toward making recommendations to the governor and the legislature on what it means to earn a high school diploma in Massachusetts. The survey is quick but substantive. Most importantly, it is accessible. It can be found at mass.gov/K12 Grad Council, or if you just Google Massachusetts Graduation Council, you'll find it. Really would appreciate your time in taking that survey and then sharing it as well. That is all, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Commissioner.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I want to echo my thanks to Jake and Amber and to Edie, who led us on an incredible tour of what used to be an old dairy farm, it sounds like, but now is a beautiful, developmentally incredible place for our young people who are struggling with the most intense behavior issues across the Commonwealth. And so we owe you and your team an incredible amount of gratitude for the work you do every day and for the opportunity to see the work at hand. The dedication, and this board will be considering regulations that govern the residential parts, and to be able to walk through and see the programs and many of the issues that we will be grappling with, including staffing and cameras and lots of things we were able to see firsthand, as well as the caring, deep professionalism of the staff here. So thank you for opening your doors to us. I think there was some public vulnerability there too. We really are grateful for the opportunity to be here and to ground our work in those who are doing it in the community. So looking forward to that conversation later today, and for the board members who had the opportunity to participate as well. So thank you for your leadership. Walker is really an example of see a need, fill a need. And that represents a lot of the work that we've been doing together. So you have been doing work in the residential space. You have an outpatient program. You are now thinking about therapeutic preschools. You are pushing in early childhood mental health services. So bringing your expertise to where it's needed in the community. And we will talk a little bit about this when we have a chance to have an update on the residential regulation programs. But one of the things that was very evident in the tour is the number of state agencies that Walker and programs like you across the state are navigating, right? So EC governs where they sleep, and Department of Elementary and Secondary where the children are educated, and Department of Public Health where they're receiving medical care. So we thank you for navigating that, and we are committed to trying to figure out how to make that work from this side of the table as well. So thank you. A couple of other quick updates for the board while I have the floor. When I was before you at the last meeting, we were talking about the FY25 budget. You will hear an update on what's happening for FY26 budget, which starts on July 1st of this year. But as I mentioned at the last meeting, we are serving more children through child care financial assistance than ever before. And the governor in April had filed a supplemental budget to make sure that we were able to end the budget year fully in the black in our budget. And I am thrilled to report that with deep gratitude that the legislature took action, both this House and the Senate, on that FY25 supplemental budget, and all of our bills are being paid as we speak right now, and there'll be no delays for payments for child care financial assistance to our providers. So again, deep gratitude to our finance team led by Eric Hansen, who you'll hear from again in a minute, and to our teams across the state and Family Access who've been working with our providers. So really grateful that that action was taken. I'm also happy to report that after a short delay, the Early Education Care Scholarship Program for higher education is now posted and up online. You can find information on our website. There are open sessions, and we have already had, I think, incredible attendance at the opening sessions we've had so far, and are looking forward to seeing more and more students being able to access those scholarship funds. Another greatly anticipated and slightly delayed announcement that we expect to be able to make next week is awards for our new and very first of its kind Family Child Care Capital Grant Program. So we have done this in partnership with Mass Development within the Executive Office of Economic Development, and are really excited. We're going to be rolling out the first round of that announcements hopefully next week, and there'll be subsequent rounds. I think I mentioned last month that we received somewhere north of 1,300 applications for that program, demonstrating enormous need across the Commonwealth. So we look forward to sharing updates with you about that program. Finally, just on the CBPI Roadshow, we have been in Somerville, Northampton, and in Worcester, and then we have the secretary along with us in Sandwich. Next, we'll be going to Framingham and then continuing the tour. And it has been, just want to thank the community members who have opened up their programs to us. And it has been an incredible opportunity to see true partnership happening at the local level between school districts and the community-based programs who have come together to maximize resources, to meet additional needs for children. And I think we can all agree, who's been visiting the programs, that one of the truly incredible accomplishments of the Commonwealth Preschool Partnership Initiative is the way special education services are now being delivered in the community-based settings. In some of the programs, we heard about 13 buses not having to show up at a child care program to pick up kids to go to the public schools because now they're getting services right on site. We heard about teachers getting educational attainment and being able to watch some of the interventions that are happening in OT and speech within the classrooms. It is lifting entire communities and expanding access to services, and really doing what we've all said, which is centering the children and families' experience. We got to meet with two parents who said they wouldn't have been able to avail themselves and their children of the services if this model weren't in place in the community in Sandwich, and we heard that across the board. So really excited to continue to share sort of the findings of that program with all of you, and big gratitude to Jocelyn Bound and her team who've been working on our strategies around expanding that program. Finally, I had an opportunity to participate in 4 Kids Only graduation for the first ever in the country full-time apprenticeship program for after-school and out-of-school time staff. I was at the launch a year ago, and last week I got to celebrate with the apprentices who graduated, having done 150 hours of technical training, 2,000 hours of on-the-job training, and they couldn't have been more proud about the professionalization and the path that they were on. And for us to be able to partner with the Division of Apprenticeship Standards within the Executive Office of Labor and Workforce Development, and For Kids Only and EEC coming together to make sure that we are continuing to lift the field and give professional development opportunities where they haven't been before. So that was a pretty exciting moment for us. And the early education and childcare programs is the fastest growing sector of the apprenticeship field right now. And that has to do with our partnership across state government. So really excited to share that with you. Okay, long update, but it's the last of the fiscal year, so I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Great, thank you, Commissioner. We have a couple housekeeping things to do, but I just want to confirm no one's here for public comment, correct? All right, and I do want to acknowledge that the board did receive public comment prior to the start of the meeting that has been distributed. 2 votes to take. One is the first is on the approval of the May minutes. We have before us the minutes of the May 14th, 2025 board meeting. Are there any additions, corrections, or edits to the minutes as submitted? Hearing none, I make the motion to approve the minutes of the May 14th board meeting. Can I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Great. Next, we have before us, as we've indicated a few times, the end of the fiscal year. We have before us the proposed meeting dates for next fiscal year. Are there any questions, comments regarding the proposed dates? Hearing none, I move that the Board of Early Education Care, in accordance with general law.
Just a correction, the Wednesday, December 10th, should be a 2025.
Oh, 2020.
Yeah, there's a couple of those.
All right, so we'll adjust the year, right?
Yep,
on
2025.
Okay. We will, I think, should we double check the dates?
Double check the dates?
Yeah,
Or
the year.
2026. Which one? I'm sorry.
December.
December is,
December. Oh, okay. I'll update that. Sorry.
That's
Is-
okay.
But it is December 10th,
It is December 10th, but
2025.
Okay.
So with the.
With the amendment?
With the friendly amendment.
Yep.
To the date for December.
With the amendment with the dated December, I move that the Board of Early Education Care, in accordance with General Law, Chapter 15D, Section 3B, shall meet in accordance with the schedule set forth above, and that all meetings will begin at 1 p.m. and will be held at 50 Milk Street, Boston, unless otherwise announced and duly posted. Can I have a second?
Second.
And all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Now we'll turn it over to our first agenda item on the state budget.
Great. I want to invite our Chief Financial Officer, Eric Hansen, to come up, who will give an opportunity to sort of walk through where we are. Many of you are aware of where we are in the state budget process. You know, the formal process starts with the governor filing her budget, this year called House 1, in January, followed by the House and the Senate, then taking up their versions of the budget and debating. So now the House and Senate have completed their versions, and there will be a conference committee named that will work out the differences between those 2 versions with a final budget, we hope, for the start of the fiscal year. So I've asked Eric to walk through the variations in the different versions of the budget. We'll start with a reminder of what the governor filed in her budget for the department, as well as kind of highlighting the differences. There are a number of areas of variation between the House and the Senate versions of the budget that we will be watching closely and be sure to update you on as they go. The last thing I'll mention, and Eric will say this too, is that the governor filed 2 things in January with her budget. She filed the FY26 budget, which is our traditional line items, and then she also filed an FY25 supplemental budget for fair share. So it was surplus funds from the so-called millionaire's tax or the fair share funds, and the governor filed a supplemental budget with the surplus of those funds, which included a number of investments for the department. The House and Senate also took up that supplemental budget and put their fingerprints on different versions of that, which will also be part of the budget debate as it unfolds over the next month. So we'll also walk through the 3 versions of those as well. Okay, Eric, take it away.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good afternoon, chairs, board members, and guests. As Commissioner said, my name is Eric Hansen. I'm the CFO at EEC. So today we'll be going over the budget process and specifically focusing on the Senate's budget as it was released last month and how it compares to both the governor's and House's final budget. So here we just see the process again. We're now in June and July awaiting. We have all three versions of the budget for FY26 and are awaiting kind of the conference budget where the House and Senate reconcile both of their versions. So just as a reminder, the governor's FY26 budget proposal made significant investments in key initiatives for early education and care. In particular, $25 million across both House 1 and her fair share supplemental budget to maintain current grantees and expand planning grants for CPPI. There was also just over $1 billion to maintain CCFA caseload into fiscal year 26. And the governor's budget also sustains C3 at $475 million to continue investments in our early education systems operational supports. There are some other more granular investments here. I will, for the sake of time, allow folks to read these before we move on to the House and Senate budget proposals. So I'll draw your attention to the right side of this slide, the Senate proposals. And to walk through this, you'll see that there's a lot of similarity between the governor's House 1 proposal and the Senate's final version: support for caseload, level funding for C3, and a similar slightly increased funding for CPPI. Some notable differences include a $1.5 million increase to Head Start grants, state Head Start grants, from $18.5 to $20 million. A slight reduction of $750,000 to $1 million for Reach Out and Read, and the continuation of $2.5 million for employer-sponsored care program. This was in the FY25 GAA, so the current fiscal year's budget. I'll note too that, not in this slide, but the Senate's budget for EEC's administrative line item is funded at the House 1 level, and it includes one earmark, but also restores $2 million in operational funding that the House's version had earmarks which cut into. So bear with me as we walk through this. A lot of lines to go through, but I'll do my best. On this slide, we see the three versions of the FY26 budget by each line item or appropriation, or account. And I want to draw your attention to the variances between the House's and the Senate's budget. And the reason for this is because this is what the agency is monitoring moving forward into this month for the conference budget. These are the items that the two chambers will be negotiating over and the inclusion in the final GAA, what will become the final budget for 26. So you'll see that there are differences between these two, the House and Senate budget, for our admin and quality line items. This is the top two rows. This is largely related to earmarks and operational reduction in the House budget, and the Senate did fund at the House 1 level, our admin line, and for quality carries $2 million, shifts it to CPPI. I should say the Senate budgets, the final budget, that figure should be for admin $8.3 million, because inclusive of an earmark for Jumpstart for Children, which is a pre-K language, literacy, and social emotional learning programming. The House and Senate also differ in funding levels for employer-sponsored care programming, career pathways, and the level of funding for the Reach Out and Read program towards the bottom of this slide. Now, this are fair share funded line items, and there are some changes here as well. Largely...
Eric, let me just take a step back to remind the board that, and it's a very fortunate thing for us, but it creates an additional complication, which is that the EEC budget is now funded in its line items by both general fund dollars and fair share ongoing dollars, which is different than the supplemental fair share budget. So there's an amount of revenue that there's an agreed upon amount of revenue coming in through the fair share amendment that is then built into the budget and into the line item. So you'd have one line item that might be partially funded by general funds and partially funded by ongoing fair share dollars. In this particular year, there was also a surplus in the fair share, so that's what we will talk about in a minute. But as you see the budget, as you see this slide and the next one, you can see that our line items are partially funded in some cases by general funds and partially funded by fair share. So the number you see on this slide might not be the full actual amount for the funding. Just
Thank you for that
Sorry.
clarification, which is important for the Senate's budget because its version does include a lot more of what we call like fund splits in the state finance world across these two funds, the general fund and fair share. So for the Senate budget here, you can see that it models child care supports off the House 1 version. This is the last, going backwards here, this is the last line item, if you will. And this $98 million carries funding for rate increase annualizations, rate increases from 25 into 26, annualizing those, waitlist remediation, and caseload affordability. The House budget separates these out across different line items, but also did not annualize a significant portion of rates into FY26. Now, I mentioned these differences because, as I said before, these are what will go into the conference committee to be sussed out as we move into 26, and we'll be monitoring those closely. When it comes out, the governor will have, once that conference bill is put out, the governor will have 10 days for a veto period, whether she signs it right away or has the consideration to make line item vetoes. That's the next step in the process. We anticipate this in the next weeks. Sometimes it takes shorter, sometimes it takes longer. So we're taking the over and under on that. Finally, as Commissioner mentioned, there's the fair share FY25 fair share supplemental budget. And the Senate's version of this took a different approach than both the governor's and the House's. So the Senate's version included minimal fair share supplemental funding for EEC. However, as I mentioned, its FY26 budget proposal, the Senate allocates more fair share funding to those programs, such as C3 and Head Start, by dividing resources between the general fund, operating funding, and fair share dollars. With that, I think that's our last slide. So we'll leave this up.
So, board members, questions for Eric or me? No. So obviously the variations in the different budgets will allow us, we are tracking very closely the administrative line item, as I mentioned, making sure we can support our incredible EEC talent and all of the infrastructure work we've been doing at the agency. We are incredibly supportive of making sure we're able to move forward on the Commonwealth Preschool Partnership Initiative and also paying close attention to the caseload numbers to make sure that we can continue to support all the children that are currently enrolled and those we are projecting to be serving into next fiscal year. We'll also be watching closely opportunities to fully fund our Career Pathways program, which has been so essential for higher education opportunities for our educators. So we will keep you all updated as the budget debate continues and the timing of that. So thank you very much, Eric.
Thank you.
Eric.
Pause and see if Eric wants to. Oh. We might take a quick pause. I think we've been joined by our local representative, and I wonder, Representative, if you'd like to come and say a few words. Thank you very much for hosting us in your district, and welcome to this new role. We are very much looking forward to partnering with you, and we're very happy to be here at the wonderful Walker School.
Thanks. Thanks for having me, and thanks for coming to Needham. So great to see you all. My background is as an educator, both as a teacher at the high school level of starting in Lawrence, and then as an administrator, both at Sandwich, Mashpee, and then finally getting out of being the principal of Holbrook Middle High School. And one of the reasons I went into this new role as a state rep was to still try and make a difference in the education space. So it's great to see the secretaries and, all the other people trying to make a difference in the lives of kids. So thanks for having me. Thank you. Yeah.
Timely arrival as we were speaking about the budget, so thank you.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I tried to get here earlier. There's a lot to juggle in this new role.
Oh, but thank you for, on behalf of the board, just want to thank you for hosting us here in the district. It is important for us to get around the Commonwealth and hear from as many different stakeholders as possible as we do this work, and so grateful to be out here today.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for the work you guys do. Seriously, it's awesome. So.
And also the incredible partnership we've had with the legislature. In fact, one of the actions we'll be taking later today is a shared goal between the legislature and the Haley Driscoll administration around continuing our reforms in child care financial assistance. And we are grateful for the support this year and going forward as well. So
That's
look
great.
forward to the partnership ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative.
Thanks again, everyone. Appreciate it.
All right, back to the regularly scheduled program. So I want to invite up, oh, there we go, Rob Orthman, Erica Morin, our General Counsel, Deputy General Counsel, and Tyrese Nicholas, Deputy Commissioner for Family Access and Engagement. Board members, you will recall that several months ago we came to you with proposed revised regulations for child care financial assistance. In response both to the governor's Gateway to Pre-K agenda and advocacy by our legislature and language that was included in the FY25 budget. We proposed regulatory changes, a number of which we will run through today, the most significant of which is changing eligibility, initial eligibility for child care financial assistance from 50% of state median income to 85% of state median income. When we brought that to you, you authorized us to put it out for public comment. We have now received comment, and we are here to present to you the feedback that we received, the revised regulations, and to ask for your vote to support sending those to the Secretary of State for promulgation. So I'm going to turn it over to the team to walk through the proposed changes, the public comment period, and our timeline.
So as the commission, afternoon, Chair,
Good afternoon.
Secretary, and board members. So in February, we were here before you sharing that in the FY25 budget, it included some language to codify CCFA, and within that language was a number of additional changes to the regulation that included expanding eligibility, initial eligibility for CCFA to 85%, and also to codify some things that are already currently in our regulations and our policies. And so that's priority access for staff working in early education and care programs, families experiencing domestic violence, as well as families experiencing homelessness, and our disabled families. Including in that as well as just calling out that for child care financial assistance, no family receiving a public benefit, we would count that income. We currently do not do this. So a lot of these changes are things that are currently we're already doing in our current regs, but it's actually just codifying, which in plain terms is just putting it into Mass General Law. The last additional change that we were required to do is to really annually review the program, right? Look at the program, look at what we could do better, how we could streamline processes, how we could reduce administrative burden, improve technology, as well as language access. all things that we've been working on and we've been doing. So we're here today to share the outcome of our public comment. And so we got the approval to go to public comment. We made the changes, went to public comment, and the rest of the team will explain what some of those comments were and what we're proposing to put in into the changes.
And I would just note that those changes will be effective January 1st, 2026.
Thanks.
Good afternoon, Mr. Secretary, Chairman, Commissioner, members of the board. Nice to see you again. So as Therese mentioned, we went to public comment in February. It was about a 2-month or so public comment period. Included in that was a online public forum, which we held and was attended by a handful of providers who provided feedback at that session as well. We received 6 total written comments, each of which we analyzed and reviewed, and there was a lot of helpful suggestions, many of which are, as I'll go through in a moment, but are kind of clarifying, if you will, from the field as to some technical changes we could make to further assist. And so, briefly, without getting too deep into the legalese, unless you want me to, we are clarifying the definition of an intentional program violation. So that's if a family commits an intentional violation, fraud, or some type of activity to better align with our federal regulations. We are also editing the priority access categories. So the legislature, in codifying this, created access categories, all of which we currently have for families that have a disability or experiencing domestic violence, homelessness. Many of you are familiar with those. To make it clear that those are all of equal status, we have adjusted the regulation accordingly such that one does not necessarily take precedence over the other, which we feel is consistent with the legislative intent. And then very briefly, some technical changes to the language around experiencing domestic violence to make sure that the definitions align within the regulations. We are formally putting into regulations something we already do, which is excluding Social Security benefits from any consideration of household income. We also have discretion in policy to add further categories as we go, and some of which we've already done. And the last thing that came to light was a slight discrepancy for individuals that are doing accelerated semester work for college or for college credits. They had separate requirements which were kind of burdensome and duplicative, and actually there was a slight inconsistency, so we have removed that to make it easier for families that are doing that kind of work to receive part or full-time care. So those are the changes. Those were all proposed during the public comment. We appreciated them, and we propose incorporating them into the final regulations today.
And so we're putting this before the board now. So we seek your authority to revise these CCFA regulations and to send these to the Secretary of the Commonwealth to have them published in the Massachusetts Register. And we're proposing that they be effective January 1st, 2026. So does anybody have any questions?
Any questions or comments from the board? None? All right. Hearing none, I would move that the Board of Early Education and Care, in accordance with General Law, Chapter 15D, Section 3F, having solicited public comment as required by General Law, Chapter 30A, hereby approves 606 CMR 10.00, the proposed final amended CCFA regulations, and authorizes the Commissioner of the Early Education and Care to file the proposed final amended regulations with Secretary of the Commonwealth for publication in the Massachusetts Register. Can I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you for all of your efforts.
Thank you, team, and thank you, board members, yeah. I just want to thank the members for their actions. This was a key element of the Governor's Gateway to Pre-K agenda as we continue to focus on pushing the multiple levers. How do we increase affordability and access for families, stability for our programs, and invest in our workforce? And so a big part of continuing the reforms that this board has so embraced with us around regulations is increasing up to the 85th percentile, which is the maximum federally allowable, and what we believe should be the foundation of the system that we continue to build. So as we build our new family portal and work on our new IT systems and update policies and procedures, your actions will allow us to make sure that the system is built on that maximum allowable eligibility, and over time allow us to reach additional families at higher income levels. So we're grateful for the board's action today and also support our legislative colleagues and many in the community who are looking forward to this change. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner, and do just want to extend thanks to the team for their work on this, as well as those that participated in the public process part of this. This is really important that people attended the public forum, submitted public comment. You heard from Rob that is important to the process, and so to those that took the time to do that, want to express gratitude as well. All right.
Moving right along?
Moving right along.
Okay, moving right along. We're going to move from the family lever, the family access and affordability lever, to the program stability lever, which also helps with affordability for families and workforce investments. But the Commonwealth Cares for Children program, or C3, as we commonly know, is a regular topic on our board agendas. You know, as we have talked about, this is a program that continues to be in transition from its origins in a COVID-era stabilization program, fully federally funded to really keep the childcare community and programs from free fall during the pandemic. Now in Massachusetts has become a permanent, thanks to our legislative partners and the support of the governor, a permanent part in statute of the department's infrastructure, funded at $475 million in all three versions of the budget that we just looked at. And also a number of changes as this program moves from this federally funded COVID-era stabilization into ongoing infrastructure and operational support for programs at the department. We continue to transition, we continue to learn about the impact of this program, and we continue to iterate on how it's working for programs based on the feedback that we're hearing and from new legislative requirements. So today we wanted to update the board on some of the changes that we're discussing going into this next fiscal year based on the feedback we've received, new statutory requirements, and ongoing sort of data mining on the impact, on the most important impacts that the program's having. So happy to have the team here to update us. And it might be nice for each of you to introduce yourself, because I'm not sure that the board members have seen and met you, Ellen, in your new role. So why don't we have you each introduce yourselves?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Jose Mendez. I'm Director of Child Care Business Operations and Facilities. I work for Jocelyn Bound.
Jocelyn Bound, Deputy Commissioner for Workforce Program Supports and Innovation. I think everybody is familiar with me. But Ellen, it's great to have you on the C3 team.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Ellen Song. I'm the Child Care Operations and Financing Strategy Specialist, and very happy to be part of this team.
And I'm just thrilled to have Ellen added to the team, because this provides us with, Ellen is now focusing her attention on leading the C3 work, both thinking about the administrative pieces, but also all the ongoing data work as well, and managing that. So it's great to have this level of focus, which I think reflects the growing up of the program. That's part of the topic of conversation for today. We've been speaking with you regularly about C3 and thinking a great deal as a team about how do we support this program in transitioning from its early days into a more mature state. Legislative language has also been introduced that requires that, asking us to consider regulations, use the public comment forum as a way to support the development of the formula. And we ourselves are committed to the work that we have been doing of continuing to pay close attention to what the data and the field is telling us about how C3 is functioning, while we're also paying attention and thinking about how to maintain and grow the program moving forward. So a few months ago, we came and spoke to you a little bit about some of the feedback that we've been hearing. We continue to think about what the implications of that are for the formula and the next steps. And in thinking about this, we are recognizing first and very importantly that we need to be cautious in making changes in the program. There have been many big changes over the past few years. It's important that this program does provide stability to the field. So any changes that we're considering in the short term it's important that we pay attention that we're not making any significant shifts immediately. We also do have new statutory requirements that we need to attend to. There is now a requirement that goes into effect this fiscal year that programs receiving C3 are willing to enroll children with child care financial assistance. It does not require that children are actually enrolled, but just that there is a willingness on the program's part, if there is space and a child comes to them with an interest in attending, that they would be willing to take that child. There's also an expectation we begin to think about how to encourage salary benchmarks as part of the C3 funding expectation, so that's something that we've started to look at and think about. And we discussed a little bit in April, but we have heard from the field that there are a couple of places where the equity adjustment doesn't seem to be working exactly as intended. There are some communities that are largely considered very low opportunity areas based on the COI index that we've been using to calculate equity adjustments, but they might, but our calculations right now are based on census tract areas, and they might have a couple of low as opposed to very low census tracts. So we've looked at, what would it could we identify some communities that really are holistically very low opportunity communities and not use the census tract method in those particular areas. There have also been feedback that the second tier, where programs receive the same equity adjustment regardless of whether they serve one child with child care financial assistance or up to just under 25%, it feels like that's a very broad spread of programs to receive the same adjustment. And we dipped our toe into also recognizing other types of scholarship assistance outside of CCFA. We found that that was an effective approach. There are some programs that are doing that work, and we also want to think about how we might integrate that into the formula further. And finally, we maintain a commitment to the ongoing collection of data and field feedback, which I've already mentioned. Finally, you just saw the budget. C3 is level funded in FY26, most likely, based on the budgets that we're seeing. So it's important that we pay attention to the fact that any changes that we make in 26 must be cost neutral. This is just a reminder, but these are the levers that we have in the C3 program. We can look at the eligibility requirements, the fund use requirements, the formula, and the types of data that we collect. And we're going to go through each of these and just provide an update on our thinking in each area. First of all, in eligibility, there is a new statutory requirement. The language is on the slide. I'm not going to read it aloud, but it effectively does what I just described. Programs need to demonstrate their willingness to accept children with CCFA. And our plan is to introduce, when we do adjust the application, introduce an attestation that programs will be required to complete that they are willing to accept children with CCFA. When we look at the data that we have, we know that currently 69% of programs already participate in CCFA. That means they have an active voucher agreement or a contract. And of those programs that are not currently participating, 83% have indicated that they would be willing or that they're considering but undecided. So all indications are that this shouldn't be a significantly difficult transition, but it is certainly one that we are required to make. We also are thinking about the fund use as per the expectation that we start thinking about more intentionally how C3 is designed to support educator compensation. We have begun to look at the fund use requirements we've put in place for the grant and considering adding in an expectation that 50% of C3 funds are used to support programs workforce. And Ellen has done some work on the data to understand potential impacts of that.
As we can see on the slide, most of the programs, based on data gathered in our C3 survey, already report that more than 50% of the C3 funds are invested in their workforce. The remaining 18% of programs would need to shift their use in C3 funds, but we anticipate with this long runway and with programs already investing most of their funds in the workforce, that we hope that this will be a good investment for programs.
Can I just ask you guys to speak up a tiny bit? I'm not sure the folks in the back can hear, and this is for live stream, so you have to project.
I will use my best teacher voice.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
And thinking about the formula, I started to share some of the ways in which we've been looking at adjustments for the formula. First of all, thinking about, are there opportunities to define cities and municipalities, particularly some of the gateway cities, as largely low opportunity communities and include all programs in those communities in the Tier 1 adjustment. We also are looking at ways that we can integrate more fully the non-CCFA scholarships into the equity adjustment. To date, we have sort of a 25% benchmark built into Tier 2, and we're looking at ways to make the provision of non-CCFA scholarships additive to CCFA scholarships and increase the attention and incentive paid to programs providing those types of supports for families. We're also looking at the structure of Tier 2 because of the fact that it is a flat adjustment regardless of where a program might fall in the use of CCFA. And so we're looking at options to adjust a little bit more within that tier to reflect the variation within that tier.
Jocelyn, I just want to reiterate that we have gotten a lot of feedback about making sure that we are inclusive around childcare financial assistance. Many programs do fundraising, support private scholarships for families who can't afford it. Many provide fee reductions for their staff. And we think just like the program has succeeded in incentivizing programs to be interested in taking childcare financial assistance, this can also be a very important incentive for either reductions for staff or to make scholarships available for families. So sort of sharing the opportunity and recognizing the work that programs are doing to make programs more affordable for their families or their staff. And so by recognizing childcare financial assistance outside just the vouchers or our contract system kind of broadens the recognition of that affordability work that's happening at the community level.
Thank you. We've also heard the feedback that the CEO compensation ratio, so again, that's the ratio of CEO compensation of the highest paid employee in the organization to the lowest paid educator. At a certain threshold, at 30-to-1, we do not allow programs to receive equity adjustments. And the point has been made that that might not be the best approach because we do want all programs, particularly some of our largest programs, to support children with various forms of childcare financial assistance, and that's something that perhaps we should revisit. And then we've also heard about a number of different program models that we could think about paying attention to, particularly out-of-school time programs that may employ full-time staff, which were not calculated into our current cost model, or some of the additional staffing needs for programs that are really, and I think we're in an example, are dedicated to serving children with special needs and have staffed appropriately to do that, and also not something that's reflected in our current C3 rate structure or model. So a number of things, I think, for us to think about and ongoing work to do.
Jocelyn, if I can, just real quick, just
Yep.
as a reminder to the board, one of the also changes here going forward in the next fiscal year will be that changes to the appointment come before this board, which has not happened historically. And so really important for us to be really thoughtful about, how we engage in this process to support the growth of the program and the innovation that's embedded in the program.
So very specifically, and I'm glad you paused here, Chair, because it is the formula that the statute now requires us to formally establish and for the board to send out for public comment and then adopt. So that will be a process that we may be calling you over the summer for some of that process, and some may happen in the fall. Thank you. On the data collection side, we do plan to continue the process that we've introduced of having an application with periodic surveys, and Jose will review the structure that we're looking at.
Sure. So part of what we utilize this application and survey for is to speak to some of the adjustment considerations and make sure we're able to track trends over time. And we do that in a couple of ways. First being the monthly recertifications that we have for providers where they basically let us know that everything has changed or not changed for their program. Every 6 months, what we've done is establish a cadence that's fairly predictable in November and May, as you can see in the slide, where that questionnaire is expanded and additional information is gathered. Which helps us in terms of financial planning and to, again, track trends across the field. Another tool that we use is the biannual survey. What we do for that is we have a survey in August and February. The August survey is primarily focused on planned expenditures for providers, while the February survey is more focused on workforce and family access. That's not to say that those are the only topics that are covered in the survey. Based on things that come up throughout the year and public feedback, we do toss in additional questions that allow us to sort of delve deeper into issues that might arise. But we've also tried to be as transparent as possible by providing the survey in full that the providers can review prior to having to submit the survey question by question. And all of this basically feeds into our ability to forecast for the upcoming years, plan for ongoing analysis, as well as analyze any potential successes that C3 may be incurring.
And we do hold a commitment to limiting the number of questions to the information that we absolutely need. So any question that we ask, we have a reason for asking the question and a use for that information.
A good moment to probably recognize and thank our providers for
Yes.
the work we know it takes when in their monthly certifications and the survey data. It is a lot of work for our programs and providers to be able to provide this information to us and be doing it on a regular basis. And as Jocelyn said, our commitment is to make sure we're only asking for the data that we need and that we use. And you know, over the years that we've been presenting data on this program, that we are continuing to try and understand its impact, to see where the funds are going, to see how it's impacting family affordability as well as teacher salaries. And so thank you to our programs and providers for continuing to provide that information so that we can continue to understand how to grow this program and to grow it up over time.
Thank you. That's a very important point. And we can't say it enough. So this is now looking at our timeline, and I think just reiterating what the commissioner called out and the chair called out. This is a new process. We are now required to bring any changes through a public comment period and establish a formula as well as maintain a formula that way. So we're working on sort of how to work through that process, but we're in the spring and summer period right now. We continue to bring you information regularly about C3, what we're hearing, what we're thinking, to eventually move to a point where you would vote on a set of proposals. So we're trying to make sure you have full information to consider by the time we get to a vote. You know, you're very familiar with the issues. And then once the vote is had, there would be a public comment period. We're looking to finish that at some point in the fall for any FY26 changes. We would then assess the comment, make any revisions based on your feedback or the public comment, what we heard in the public comment period, bring this back to you for consideration and ultimately a board vote. And then eventually, once that is complete, we would move forward to adjust the application and change the recertification process in any way that is appropriate. And again, I think, you know, remembering Jose's slide, our goal is to continue on this cycle where we relaunch and update everybody's calculations in November and have that be the annual cycle. So that is the timeline that we're on at this point.
Any questions, comments from the board?
I have a question to the team. So I really love this slide because it sort of gets at like what is the money for?
Yeah.
And if you add up the 155 programs that are below 50% spend on workforce, I would love to know more about who are those programs? Like what's their structure? What's their size? Where are they? Because if that's maybe the struggle to get to the 50% threshold, and if the goal, and we're trying to meet and achieve the goal of the C3 model, it might tell us a little bit more about the other levers, eligibility, funding formula, thresholds, et cetera.
Yeah.
Thank you. Further questions, comments from the board?
I have a,
Maria.
I'd love to see, I think we're just information on one site. Part of the budget proposal comes in with specific language on how to allocate C3 funding. So it'd be great to have, as part of the C3 formula reconsideration, just have a list of like, what are the things that we need to meet based on the budget that gets approved and whatever legislation happens, so that we make sure that we're interpreting that the right way. The other question I had was regarding the attestation for eligibility. Are they, once they complete the attestation, regardless of whether they have one child or not in CCFA, are they required to complete the application and survey?
The voucher agreement?
Yes.
Yeah. We're working out what the process would look like, but that obviously would be a goal, that, you know, that you need the voucher agreement if you don't have a contract to finally accept a child, and it would be good to have that in place when a child comes, rather than having to go through the process.
Absolutely. And then the survey afterwards too, just so we can track, okay, are they really taking it? Are there any space for those children in those programs?
So I'll just jump into, because we've had a couple conversations with the child care resource and referral agencies. We don't want to create a mad lineup to sign voucher agreements. I think we reviewed a little bit of the data. 60% of programs that are participating in C3 now are already taking childcare financial assistance, and I think of those who aren't, 69% indicated they would be interested in taking it or to be available. So I think we want to start with the commitment and make sure that if we do have a child who's moving from one program to another and wants to make that choice to a new program, that we would have an expedited or a process in place to make sure that a voucher agreement could get in place and that we could move things forward at the same time with not sort of creating a backlog at the CCR&Rs. So communicating these changes and these expectations is sort of part of that process, letting folks know if you're participating in C3, this change is coming, it is statutorily required. We will be making sure that people are attesting to it, and then we will be providing technical assistance on how to make yourself available to sign a voucher agreement in partnership with the child care resource and referral agencies. But I think being able to really talking about it as much as we can right now so that people are preparing themselves for that soon eventuality.
Carolyn.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. When it comes to workforce investment, what are we specifically looking at? The reason I ask that is that when there's funding increases, to programs, you want to make sure that that money actually makes its way down to staff levels and not just an organization. So is there more than one thing we're looking at?
Ellen can share
We define
what
it
we
very
have.
broadly, so it includes payroll and benefits, and also we acknowledge there's difference between centers and FCCs. So in that specific graph that we looked at for workforce, that was for center-based programs. But we want to acknowledge that there's a whole host of different types of workforce investments, and then all of those are being attributed for programs.
So we are looking at whether or not the money's making it to the staff?
Yes, so it's not just payroll, but benefits, support for mental health, a whole host of things.
But the intention is to make sure it's going to staff, which I think is what Carolyn's question is that this is moving around the expectation that as this program grows, we expect to see salary increases as much as possible, recognizing programs have been receiving these funds, so there may be a shift that needs to happen at the program level in order to make sure that they're investing in the staff and the workforce.
Well, one way to retain them is to pay them better, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And also attracting new staff as well. So offering programs opportunity to offer a one-time payment or a one-time bonus, like a sign-on bonus for new staff as well.
And I also think it's important to recognize that this is a process, and this is the first step in meeting the legislative requirement that we do set some expectations around salary. So, we're shifting the attention on C3 to C3 as a support for compensation. And then the next stage would be thinking about, are there additional expectations that are needed to really get at what you're trying to focus on?
Similar to the child care financial assistance expectation, we are signaling the direction we're going in so that programs know where we are headed, and we're transparently demonstrating that so that they can begin to make that move. We are required through statute, and we'll make sure that you all have everything that's required for you and for us in terms of changes to the program to begin to set salary expectations over time, and connecting it to the investments that we're making. I do want to just call out the sort of unique circumstances of family child care providers for whom the C3 grants are income. And so, we have a different model in family child care in terms of thinking about salary scales and how we think about this is really their salary or their income, or goes into their salary and income. And our cost models and other things will give us additional data on how to make sure that we're capturing workforce investments in the family child care space appropriately for that setting. Yes.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
Just another question on the funds use. Like at present, is there a requirement in place, or is that like we're moving toward requirement?
There are categories of allowable fund use, but they're fairly broad.
Got it. And then in terms of, just to follow up on that, in terms of the 50% number, where does that come from?
It came from looking at the data. And I mean, also just the inverse of looking at what you just did is looking at what you just saw and said, look where the bulk of the programs are. And also recognizing, correct me if I'm wrong, but the mean is somewhere around 80%. So like not wanting to set the threshold too high, but trying to figure out a reasonable expectation that also feels like something that the majority of programs would not have any trouble meeting.
This is a good place for looking at other cost models of similar like funding structures. So for example, in Prop C in San Francisco is the commercial tax revenue that comes, so variable tax revenue that's coming in particularly to their Office of Early Childhood. And they have a similar-ish structure, albeit at the city-county level, right? But they, don't quote me on this because this is a couple of years old, but they had it set at 75% focused on staff support. And so because that is a couple years old, good question for them on how did that pan out? Have you adjusted? What does that look like now? And any other city, county, state level versions of this may be good to help us set our own standards.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you for this information. I know this is ongoing, like live work right now. You guys are in it, trying to do it. And so, you know, we will foreshadow a little bit. We may, just to keep this moving, may have to bring the board back together quickly over the summer just to meet our obligations to keep the process tight and on behalf of providers across the Commonwealth. And so appreciate the leadership of this team in front of us and those behind you that are trying to keep this moving while integrating some of the new rules of engagement that we kind of have here statutorily as well. So thank you.
Thank you all. Great job.
Thank you.
And with that, I think we'll take a 5-minute break and then come back for our last agenda item.
Okay.
Thank you in person.
Oh, please.
Friday.
All right, welcome back, everyone. I will turn it over to the commissioner for our last agenda item.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So I am really thrilled. I don't know if it's like last but not least or best for last, but really or best for last. The headline of this meeting, one of the reasons that we wanted to be here at the Walker School was our work focused on revisions to the residential regulations, which have been underway for probably more than a year now. But we are at a very important pivotal moment and wanted to have an opportunity to update the board on that meaningful work that we have underway. We are going to be presenting you with a substantive update on where we are on the regulation revision. As many of you are aware, these regulations have not been meaningfully revised since 2005, maybe parts of them since well before that. This world has changed. And for those of you who got to see the program here, the changes in the way we do behavior support, the changes in the environment, the changes in staffing, many of the issues are essential and foundational to the regulations that we oversee and monitor as part of EEC's role. As I mentioned, residential programs have many, many state agencies that they work with. So unlike childcare, where we are the regulator, we're often the funder, we certify teachers or credential them soon. We fund programs, we have C3. We have a different responsibility within the residential space, but the regulations that govern the residential spaces, the places where children sleep, and our group homes are foundational to the quality of services that children are receiving, to the staff working in the programs, and are some of the most complex, children with the most complex needs are being served in these settings. And so we are working very, very closely with our state agency partners who have a role in this, as well as with our community providers. So we've been working for more than a year with our own team to identify areas that needed to be updated. I think I heard that our regulations are 80 pages long. So part of what we want to do is make them simpler, more accessible, more understandable, easier to implement, easier to monitor too, but also modern and update to reflect the work that we want to see happening for kids and families. And we really see the residential regulations as a piece of the overall work we need to do to support the residential field. So without going into too much more detail, I'm going to turn it over to the team, but I will say that every single one of the conversations that I have been involved in around the residential programs, whether it's with our staff, with our state agency partners, here today, touring the program, it comes back to workforce. And it is not an area that we have made as much progress in terms of, in the same way that we have in the child care and early education workforce. So I think we all feel very strongly that as we move forward with changes in regulations and the expectations of what programs and the staff who work in them do, that we have a companion piece of work to do around supporting the workforce in these programs as well. So I am really looking forward to the team's presentation today, and I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves. I just want to highlight that Tim Keene, who is here as our Director of Residential and Placement Services. This is maybe not a new role to the agency, but we have not had a Director of Residential and Placement Services for a very long time, since probably before 2005. So a priority for us in the agency is to elevate the work of the residential team here, and by that, the focus on the kids and families that are served in these programs and the educators that work in them. And having a director of the program has already yielded results in making sure that we are able to engage with other state agencies and bring the kind of attention and elevation to this part of the work that EEC does. So Tim, I'm so happy that you agreed to join us in this role. He's been a supervisor in the residential unit for many years, talented expert in this area, and we're very fortunate to have him now in the director role. And Kelly Buckley, who has also been a supervisor for many years in the unit, is really a co-director in some respects, having partnered with Tim for so very many years. And Joe Rucker, you have all met now as our Deputy Commissioner for Field Operations, and we are fortunate because Joe joined us from the Department of Children and Families, which works very closely with the residential programs, so is very well positioned to help and support leading this work. And I'm very excited also to introduce Susan Habshe, who originally joined the agency to help us do some work around ABA, but has a lot of expertise in community-based programs and making sure that we are providing the supports and services for children with special needs, and has been working to support this team and to support our community engagement as well. So thank you all very much. Looking forward to the presentation, and Joe, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Commissioner, Chair, Secretary, Board. We're happy to be here. I have a personal interest too, because I've seen all sides of it. I started my career in a residential program a number of years ago, and I had the licensor that's still there today years ago. I won't ask him how I did then, but that really put me into the position of really wanting to work with children and families. And I went over to DCF and now back here with regulation. So very happy to be here today. As the commissioner said, this hasn't been done, this comprehensive overhaul hasn't been done since 1995, 30 years ago. So it's about time, right, to be able to do it. And it's important, the commissioner asked us and everybody touching it to be aspirational, because we didn't want anybody, she didn't want, we don't want anybody to think inside the box, especially when we're dealing with children and families. We have to think outside the box and then deal with how do we manage it afterwards. So this revision is intentional and not reactive. We're trying to align all of the best practice with better outcomes, better well-being for the children and family. Our hope is that the regs, the revision, can address any systemic issues and improve the outcomes for the children and youth. We also, the language is just so important. We want to eliminate language that's outdated, that's no longer relevant. As the commissioner said about the workforce, we don't want to create something that puts an already strained process on a workforce right now in residential that they're struggling to try to find staffing. So we don't want to create something that, an unintended consequence that happens from doing that. And also with the language, we want to make sure that we're using a dignified language that reflects the needs of the population that we're servicing. Next. So when we're looking at this, there's the way that we approach the regs is important, this foundational revision. When you're thinking about trauma-informed, we want to make sure we're creating a place where the children can heal and thrive. Permanency, what that means in this context is stability and support. The parent and youth voices is so important because they're the expert. They have a unique outlook on things, and they could tell us firsthand what's working, what's not working. When we look at the racial, linguistic, and cultural equity and LGBTQIA, that's all about the respect and acceptance and making sure that who's servicing and the families that are connecting, that we're being intentional about how we're engaging in conversation and how with the licensors and everyone connected is going out and connecting with these programs.
Just attempt to give a brief history of where we came from, specifically intentionally as far as this particular project goes. We began in 2021 with some research, some pretty significant research externally and internally into best practices pending and passed federal, state legislation and audited relevant regulations in the Commonwealth, but also in all 49 states. So we did a really deep dive. What we found certainly within that process is that Massachusetts is uniquely structured, but we have a lot of different agencies involved in our programs, whereas a lot of the other states, the licensing was kind of embodied in the social service, DCF worlds. So it was helpful, but also challenging for us to pull out from those environments the way in which we could map out a good path forward. We've been actively engaging both internally and externally and with work groups, partners, in reviewing our current regulations and hoping to create a solid and sustainable path forward as far as draft regulations moving forward. Although not with us today, our Director of External Engagement, Eugenia, has been instrumental in standing up and facilitating work groups, much more structured than we've been used to operating and very intentional. So what we're doing there is really trying to highlight all of the key areas of focus that we believe will hopefully move us and our other state agencies forward as far as workforce development and the other areas of the regulations that are critical and in need of updating. We've also worked, thanks so much to the Commissioner for making herself available and her team directly around this process. We've had access to cross-divisional peers from legal, policy, investigations, our DEI folks, family engagement, all to ensure that we have a clear path forward. So we're not doing this in a vacuum for sure. We are, in the end, looking to hopefully come back to the board in September with proposed changes. So it is an aggressive calendar, but like I said, we do have a couple of meetings in the bank with a solid group of providers and continue to communicate with our state agency stakeholders as well. And the anticipation of promulgation of regulations in March of 2026 with potential implementation in September of 2026. As the Commission alerted to earlier, there are a lot of people that we interface with, a lot of different agencies. We may have, folks can raise their hands later, we may have missed one or two, because we absolutely still have a lot of other folks that interface with our programs. By and large, a lot of the programs that you're seeing here are funding and contract related to our programs, so they provide the referral and the follow-up on regular care and placement of the youth themselves. We have parameters around that, which we need folks to work within. But as you can see, these different environments from DCF, DYS, DMH, our regulations have to be open enough for these environments to be able to function correctly. So we can't really have a very specific targeted regulation that's not going to apply well for programs. So we try and focus this most specifically on health and safety and making sure that every child is being met with the needs that they need within that environment, as well as the family communication is happening to the degree that it can, depending on the actual referral. We have interface with Department of Disability Persons Protection Commission, DPPC, because we actually have a lot of programs that have 18 and older youth in them. So our license umbrella goes up to 21 years old with children with special needs. So if folks are familiar, DCF investigates any sort of abuse and neglect for youth up till 18. But if something is happening in our program where there is an allegation of a youth or young adult, DPPC also works hand in hand with us around looking into those circumstances to assure that all of our children, no matter their age, are being cared for. And last but not least, the Office of the Child Advocate is a very important partner in this, in that her staff facilitates collaboration between all of these agencies. We have a structured meeting that we regularly attend so that we're openly communicating with each other around, unfortunately, concerns that may be happening in programs and programs that we need to target to see whether they need additional supports, perhaps enrollment census concerns, workforces, again, as the Commissioner meant, throughout a concern for all of our programs. But what kind of quote the child advocate, Maria Mercedes, she's always letting us know that the families that are impacted by this level of care see this as one system. So it's really vital for us to try and communicate, because they genuinely don't know, and that's one place we want to step forward and get more information from families directly of our relationship with the programs. I think they initially just refer or relate to the contract relationship that they have, the folks that are placing their children. And last but not least, we've also shared a very unique regulatory relationship with DESE, as Walker can attest, as we walked through today and learned of all the different agencies they work with. A large number of our residential programs also have approval from DESE. So we have been working with them throughout this whole process, even prior to the OCA kind of getting even more folks in the room, because we need to be very intentional in sharing information about our reviews in the programs, as well as learning from them what they're seeing in the school, so that we're not having any sort of break in care. The school shouldn't be running phenomenally, and the residential program shouldn't be at risk. As far as our stakeholders and partners, I would certainly highlight and emphasize the RMP licensing team. We've been fortunate to have a team of folks around for a while. All of them have very specific expertise as well. So depending on the program that they're going into, licensors are able to pull a teammate in and go and do a licensing review with them. So thankfully, we've had a lot of flexibility around going into programs and making sure we have the right lens on as we go in and adapt our baseline expectations of the regulations to those particular environments. But nonetheless, our team has been scribbling in the binders of their regulations for far longer than 2021. So they're very excited about moving this forward. They're instrumental in the first step of this process in meeting with outside consultants as well as inside to get that information forward to say these are the things that we feel are very important to change, adjust, adapt, and at least look at as far as revisions go for the current regulations. Starting in May of 2024, we began engaging the residential provider community through online surveys, on-site visits, and targeting work groups. During one of those site visits, we actually came to find out that the program has also been scribbling in their binders of the residential regulations, and we're happy to hand that over to us. So we've tried to match all of that information up, so it's very helpful. Our provider community is well aware of our regulations and what works, what doesn't work, and what might be a good enhancement for us. We'll next engage, as I mentioned earlier, in youth and family outreach to attain essential feedback from families. We have been afforded the ability throughout to have direct access to the youth in our programs. We can interview them, we can ask them how the food is, we can ask them how the care is, and how frequently they're getting in touch with family members and the like. But there's also that unique perspective of folks that have either aged out of our programs and have now gotten to a different place where they'll be able to reflect back and provide information. Families, folks with lived experience are all avenues of information that we still need in order to move forward. So that is a next critical step for us in this process, to engage those folks. In the past, we've certainly relied upon DCF to help us with that, and our provider community as they have work groups with families and youth, but we do want that direct access. And as always, we certainly value our communication with advocacy and trade groups. We've been in communication with them all along as well around different changes and adaptations. Many of them work with DESE and also know that DESE has other changes going on as well. So we also have to be very mindful of making sure that we're not giving folks mixed messages or coming out intentionally or otherwise with a regulation that doesn't travel across our agencies.
Just want to reiterate that point for a minute because, here you can see in Walker, they're spending the day in the school program that's approved by DESE and then going back to the residence, which is overseen and monitored by EEC. And so the alignment on behavior, both on the content of the experience for kids, behavior management techniques, it can't feel completely disjointed for the kids and their experiences or for the staff who often work back and forth too. So the alignment on sort of that experience, but also on the process of it. How often are we going out? What are we looking at when we're going out? And how disruptive might that be for programs if we're coming on one schedule and they're on a different schedule? So lots of stuff to work out with our sister agencies.
Okay. So this slide will depict the key areas of focus that we're engaged with right now with stakeholders and providers. Just to note, these will not be the only reg changes, so when we come back to you, hopefully someday soon, with all of the reg changes, but this really depicts, I think, what the commissioner wanted us to be really aspirational about and really take a deep dive in the help of Susan, who has done a great job with research. We will start with the use of surveillance cameras. For folks who did the tour with us today, we pointed out, here's a great example of a program that uses cameras in one way or the other. There's a big spectrum. Programs have been using cameras for a while, but our regs do not allude to cameras at all. However, programs have been very ambitious to say, take a look at our camera policy. They've given us camera policies over the year, so we're gonna start looking at how programs use them and what is the best way to implement that within regulation and perhaps a policy or a working procedure. Public posting and transparency. We've recognized that there is a need for transparency, and we have to weigh that with the safety and privacy of the youth residing in programs. We're looking currently at the different formats that would probably work best. We've talked with DESE around, because they also post for their schools reports that they do, and perhaps, could we post with them? How would that look? So we're really going through right now our lead system, which is our data system, to take a look at what would be the best format for folks to be able to go online, read it, and really clearly be able to understand what it is. So we've already had 2 meetings, one about the use of surveillance cameras and one meeting on public posting and transparency with providers, and they provided a lot of great feedback.
Just quick to jump in here, Kelly,
Sure.
too, which is, we are federally required for childcare programs to post information
Yeah.
about licensing visits and licensing history, and we don't have that same federal requirement, and so we haven't typically done that. And obviously, we're serving a different kind of population. There are different kinds of confidentiality and security issues at many of our programs. But there is a need for us to have some level of information available for families or placement agencies about what is our history with the program or what is that experience. So that is the conversation we're sort of having. What is the right, we are committed to a level of transparency and information about our experience and the history of a program. We want to make sure we're balancing it with confidentiality and security for the young people who are being served. So that is the complicated conversation we're having right now about what is the right level of information to post that gives those who might be placing children in these programs with the right level of information.
Yes.
Thank you.
Updates to the behavior support section. We're looking at language and practices which have not been updated for a while to make sure that we are in alignment with current standards and practices. We're trying to align language and practices with our sister agencies to reflect the actual practices happening in programs. Our primary focus right now is really what's related to timeout and separation from the group and how that should look. So lots of discussions around that, and providers have been extremely vocal and helpful. We've done tours across the state with Joe to look at programs and what their practices and policies look like. So that's been helpful, and I think that's probably one of the next topics that will be up for more engagement with folks. We're looking at minimum hiring requirements for programs. The discussion really continues on enhancing requirements without hindering, because there is a workforce development. So maybe taking into consideration, one example was, should there be an age requirement on hiring staff? Perhaps with some programs, it's not as important with others. So we're really looking at what would that be without creating more of a negative impact on the workforce.
We've had very similar conversations in
Today.
the chat. Right now,
Yep.
it's 18 and a high school degree?
18. Most programs that are going to hire younger, it's 18, depending on what kind of program they're serving. Kids who are coming home from college, a lot of programs really utilize that pool. So we wouldn't want to stand in the way of that. So we're really trying to be thoughtful about what that would look like. If it's a pre-IL program with kids in it who are 18 and 19 years old, does it make sense to be hiring 18-year-olds? So, but it might work for a program that's a very clinical focused program, and this is going to help the program out because they need clinicians, and it's college kids coming home. So we're really taking into consideration all of that without just coming down with a mandate saying nobody can hire anybody that's 18.
One of the things we've heard from programs as well as from the other state agencies is very similar to what you've heard on the childcare side, which is like, don't make it harder to get folks into the field. But if once they're in, you can really support them with on-the-job training, increases in professionalization and skill development. That's where we want to focus, so that we are not contributing to the workforce crisis, but we are making sure that staff, as they come in, are supported along a professional pathway as they come through.
And if not a regulation, at least some guidelines that perhaps programs could refer to when they're hiring to help them out in making that right choice. So the enhanced abuse and neglect, so currently we require all programs have to report abuse and neglect reports, whether it's from DPPC or DCF. We're going to add in that language, although programs will notify us about a DPPC report. It's not currently within our regulations, so we need to adjust our regulations to put it on the record. Although it really has not been problematic, it needs to be in our regulations. Minimal initial and ongoing training requirements. So for that one, I think when we talked about making regs easy to read and understand, we have a lot of regs that are mushed together around orientation and training. We get a lot of questions from folks. So we're really separating out orientation and training, adding in a few more categories of trainings that we feel would be beneficial to programs serving certain populations, but really making it clear and easy because, you know, where you eat lunch and what your benefits are, although that could be part of your orientation, that's really not what we mean necessarily by orientation and training. CPR, first aid, mandated reporter training, that for us, those are your key essential ones. Not that you can't have the other orientation, but how it's lumped in the regs, it's sometimes not clear. So we're doing some work on that. Updating language really throughout our regs because it's been a long time and things have changed over the years in the way that we support youth. So our proposed regulations will be inclusive of all language, LGBTQ, trauma-informed care, being more of a positive approach to the regulations. Sometimes when you read things, it used to be behavior management and how you manage this. So how can we be more proactive? Let's see. Continued quality improvement. So this is where all programs have to have a board of directors. Interestingly, we're presenting in front of a board. All programs have boards as well. We learned from some programs, and we just thought it was really a great way to promote quality assurance, that they would send quarterly or yearly the report, their EEC licensing report, how many investigations they had, key data points that they would send to their board. Some do once a year, some quarterly, and the board would review it. There's a reason why you're supposed to have a board, so to really try and keep the board as up to date as possible, especially if someone's having problems or they're having citations where it's going to be a monetary issue, where they're going to need to come up with money, keeping the board informed about what's going on. So we're going to be adding some language in on quality, accountability and what that looks like. So far, we've had a lot of programs. I should give credit to programs. A lot of the things that we're proposing, some programs are already doing, and they're doing a really good job. And we learn from them. We try to take the best practices of what we're seeing and take that into consideration when we're writing our regs. So that's one. And when we talk about regulation and policy, I think, Tim, you alluded to it, we've been very fortunate to have support from our policy unit and our legal unit as we move through the process. Just saying, well, we're not sure whether that could be a reg, that's more of a policy. So a policy is to support whatever is in regulation. A lot of detail can't go into regulations, and sometimes it's more prudent to put it in policy that gives more examples, more explanations to support that reg. So as we're going through regulation, we'll put question marks and say, is this a reg or policy? And we're really fortunate to have policy folks and legal folks to help with that, but we really would like to have a section of policies on our website that correlate to the specific regulations so that it's very easy for folks to find. Hopefully, when we're being very aspirational, having companion documents that you can click on a reg and it links you to, this is what we mean by this reg, whether it be a policy, a working procedure, or a technical assistance document. So we've been paying attention to that because there's definitely some policy work I think that we need to undertake.
So in regards to engagement, it's very important. We want this process to be inclusive and to make sure that we're responsive to the needs of the children and the children that are living there. We actually started with, as Kelly was saying, we were going through a process of meeting with our sister agencies because finding out their perspective and how it's impacting them, and we don't want to, again, any unintended consequences. So we've been trying to build that trust and build the legitimacy through that process of engagement. So that's been a priority. We have, the working groups are very successful. And for those that aren't a part of that working group, we are going to, in the fall, I'm going to reach out to all programs, that they're going to have an opportunity to come to the table to talk to us about their experiences and how things they would think they'd want to share the feedback, whether it be constructive or if it's positive. Either way, we need to hear that all around. And then the youth board, we're looking to work with our sister agencies because they have existing places where children and youth, so we want to tap into that already existing and be able to utilize that. Instead of creating something different, we might as well use something that's already working well. And the last slide basically just talks a little bit about making sure, this is a little timeline around, making sure the investigators, licensors, everyone has what they need to do the job, the community, everything. We're going to go out to public comment. I think the commissioner said approximately 90 days, that'll be in the fall. External engagement, that's going to continue between, we're doing it now all the way through the process, even after implementation. We're going to still engage to find out how things are going. The internal working groups that are happening, that's our folks inside, that has to continue. Training, which is not the most, but one of the most important pieces, because we can write a great reg, but if people don't understand it and the internal folks and external, it's not good. So that's what we're going to have to really focus on to make sure the community, providers, we at EEC understand what it means and how do we manage with it. So our anticipated effective date is the fall, winter of 2026.
Great. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Susan. You've become familiar faces here at this board, which I appreciate because this is really important part of our portfolio of work. And I think it's just another example of the commitment amongst the department to refreshing and bringing forward the current state of the world that we live in. And when I hear 1995 or 2005, the last time we looked at this stuff, like we should all take pause on that, but grateful for your leadership to lead this process. Just a quick clarifying question. So the next step for us would be to come forward in the fall to activate the public comment period, is that?
So our goal is to bring a red line version of the regulations to the board in September. So we'll send it to you in advance for review. And then we hope to be asking you for a vote to send it out for public comment. We would have that public comment period, bring you back like we did today with the child care financial assistance regulations, some of the comments that we received, what got incorporated, what didn't, and then ask you to vote to promulgate with a future effective date, which gives us time for training and engagement around the changes.
Any questions, comments from the board?
So I just want to say this is a great project, timely and much needed after 30 years. So thank you all for doing it. I am especially interested in the minimum initial and ongoing training requirements. As you said, and I agree with you, Commissioner, that we don't want to make barriers for hiring, but we want to make sure that staff are trained. Do we currently have minimum training requirements? Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
I think we're just trying to separate out, and I don't think that we're necessarily suggesting that the hours need to increase as far as the original, set standard as well as refresher training every year. It's culling out the orientation. So some folks are actually using orienting folks to their program as part of the overall training. So what we're trying to do is say these other trainings are very important for you to build into your actual training plan. So that may increase the hours for them if they're pulling out the orientation to do that separately. So we're mindful of that, and that is partly why we're communicating with providers to make sure that that's going to be successful. But I think our goal there is to really just kind of separate out and say, there's new trainings and new needs that are not in our regulations that we need you to speak to your populations on.
But there are minimum requirements, and they're not allowed to begin work in any capacity with kids until that orientation is completed. So even if we add on things or separate it out, that orientation that has our core CPR, first aid, mandated report, or characteristics of kids served, that has to occur before someone can be on shift alone with kids.
And so do you expect that ongoing training requirements will increase, that you'll have other areas that we want to require, present?
I think we still need to learn a little more about that. I think we're just trying to be intentional around saying these are trainings that are important in finding out from providers if they feel like that is going to add. Example is right now our regs currently say if you're going to work in a residential facility, you have to have your first aid CPR. So imagine 3 people working right now, every one of them has to have their full certification. For us, it's built into the orientation where that it could be a hindrance if you're trying to access that and get someone through that process. Now I think we're trying to think of the fact that you really need one person to be able to do that, right, on shift. So we want to set that up in a way where everyone's going to be required to have that, but not put that in a place where it's limiting people from starting work in the environment. So things like that, there's a bit of a balance we're trying to get at, but I think we still need to talk about what that impact will be, because our Walker and other folks will come back to us and say, what you're saying is going to increase, and that could be a concern.
There were some proposed training topics, but 24 hours a year is what the requirement is currently for all staff who are full-time. They have to, and we go in and we review and make sure 24 hours has been hit, and I think we did propose a few more training topics within that.
We did. We're updating it to the times, to the current times and cultural standards, best practices, to reflect things that have changed over the last 30 some odd years. And this is, I think it's important to note, this is a specific area where we can talk about the difference between policy and regulation, and where policy can support regulation, because we've ended up now with a roster of training requirements that takes up half a page. So it might be a situation where the regulation references policy, where the policy gives us more flexibility to keep up with the times and add things that are important and current and best practices as they shift and change. Because this, as we're discussing, this document last updated in 1995 with a small update to the behavior supports in 2005 related to restraint behavior management then, which we now refer to as behavior support. And if we had the flexibility to update policy, we wouldn't have been stuck with that language within the regulations.
So I don't think we'll be doing the regs over again like next. So every time there's a change, it's much easier to go to that policy and say, we want you to include these, so we are looking at that. It's important.
Like the regulations right now don't mention trauma-informed or responsive care, or the adjustments to our standards and that we have now for behavior support, LGBTQ, all of that's not mentioned. But as we started to say we need CSEC, as we started to list out the things that we needed, that list just became bigger and bigger. And we thought, well, it may be better here to consult with legal and policy and see if we can streamline the regulations and reference policy here that gives us a little bit more flexibility in the future.
Yep.
This is going to be a very important topic with our community providers. So the ones that Kelly ran through are sort of the schedule of meetings that we have with our community partners, because we'll also hear about cost implications and staffing implications. If we're pulling staff at a ratio for training, that has a cost implication for the program. So it's a little bit why I started on, like, we need a parallel strategy that's supporting the workforce development for our providers. So I think, there's probably a lot we would want to include in terms of what we would love to see the staff, and our community programs would want that too. So the question is, how are we supporting them to do that? And also getting out of 80 pages of regulations that leave us 30 years later with stuff that doesn't make any sense. So really thinking about what belongs as foundational part of what we want for health and safety and regs, and then what can be sub-regulatory that could be more living and breathing as we evolve and create greater investments, we hope, in the workforce too.
So I just want to say, very interested in this body of work, and look forward to seeing their revisions. And its need is obvious given the amount of time that has passed since something's been done. And just as sort of an example about that, I saw the surveillance cameras, right? And obviously 25 plus years ago, that was something that was not in our day-to-day life. But I do think that particularly for residential school programs where we have children with very high needs, many of them nonverbal, many of them with behavioral needs, that surveillance cameras are very beneficial in terms of keeping an eye on them, but then also if an incident were to occur, taking a look at film and seeing what happened supports. And I would think that families would be, I can say as the parent of a nonverbal child that I would be highly supportive of having surveillance cameras in any residential program that my child was in. So I just think that, you know, obviously catching up with the times and making sure that the safety of individuals, you know, both staff and students, is something that's incredibly important, and sort of catching up with the times and what's available and what's good practice is a wonderful thing. So thank you.
It is, yeah. We couldn't agree more.
I just had a couple of quick, hopefully, questions. So just so appreciative of this work. It's like dizzying, right, to think about all of the pieces. I worked for an agency where, shockingly, we oversaw the housing for migrant seasonal farm workers. And so much of what you said, Tim, you know, do the site locations have the same rules that the accountability folks have, and how does that all work together? So deep appreciation. Really interesting to learn this in this context. My questions are kind of simple. How many residential programs does EEC oversee? And then I had two other quick questions.
340-ish, off the top of my head, yeah, residential. We also have placement, if folks remember, we have
How many? I can hear you.
340.
340.
340
licenses. So,
Yep.
and those aren't all agencies. So for where we're at specifically, we might have 5, 4. I don't want to put folks on the spot, but but that's throughout the Commonwealth,
Right.
but there's some agencies
So
that hold
big.
a lot of those.
Yeah. Right.
And how many kids, Tim? About 5,000?
I think 5, yeah, I think the capacity was around 5,
Yeah.
and that's, yeah.
So I was curious, and you know, in the areas of concern, love that slide because it's super helpful to understand like what you're hearing. Is there one area that really just stands out as a challenge? So think about that for a sec. And then my other question is more in the spirit of being inspirational and thinking about systems. And so much of the regs are focused on the program, and yet when I walked around, and I understand Walker is unique, it has so many elements happening here. But as someone who's worked for the state, I was just so impressed by how much work the program has to do to make sure all the rules line up along all of those collaborating agencies that you had on the string. I know you feel that every day, but when there's emergencies that happen, that quick response from the state is so crucial. And so, in past lives, things like, Amy's gonna laugh at me, but things like internal SWAT teams, internal teams that are there, they're different than an interagency work group, which is kind of looking at the big picture, but they're there where the program picks up the phone and says, I'm having trouble and trying to solve something at DESI, but that affects this thing at EEC, and like, help me figure this out. And so I'm just curious if anything like that has come up, because that's really not about the program, right? That's as much about that interaction piece. So just to review, what have you heard as like one of the biggest areas of concern, of things you want to streamline, make better, and improve through your work? And has any of dialogue around how to help the program solve for some of the regulation in a good way, with the best of intentions? Has anything like that come up? Because you feel it when you walk through the program. Maybe not so quick. I apologize.
No, I mean, I think we have examples of how that currently works, but
Right.
not in regulation. To answer that directly, like we did a lot of work with DESI a while ago, and that's when we talk about the 2005 reg changes. We didn't just open up the whole thing, right? We
Right.
went in because we had to. There was a specific issue. There was prone restraint at the time. People were like, "This is not good. We need to address this." What came out through that process was a lot of feedback for us around what Walker or other res ed programs needed to report to EEC as well as report to DESI. So I think we did a lot of alignment then, did some communication internally to say, if one of these restraints happens in the school at the school day, we're going to have you report that to DESI, and they're going to look at that from their lens. It's in their educational environment. Same thing for residential and overnight.
Right.
So that example exists, and it just most recently dealing with programs, because there's a lot of programs that are at risk. That are in a place where we're trying to keep them to follow the baseline expectations. A lot of it is inherently around workforce, being able to get the right folks in, being able to really get the right middle management in to coach and run the shifts is really the key piece. That when you ask the prior question of whether or not we're really able to address that through workforce, it's really making sure these agencies can keep a core group of people in a field that isn't right now kind of respected to the level where we need it to be to get people to come into the field and do this, this profound work with kids. But we do work directly with DCF in those examples. When DESE isn't available, if it's a group home, we team up with their contract, their team. We know them very well. We work directly with their directors, and we'll go in and try and put everything we can in place. If it's about med administration, DCF had brought in their med folks to come in and say, we're going to straighten this out, we're going to police this, and try and help you until you can hire a nurse that can oversee it. So I think we work well in those situations. I don't know that that's something that is reflective of regulation.
And I would say regarding like what provide, like the concern for the providers regarding unfunded mandates, right?
Yeah.
That's probably one of their biggest concerns. They might agree with like 99% of what we're saying, but then in some areas, it's always going to be, we have to communicate with the funding sources to make sure that there's going to be money to pay for that. And when Carolyn said about the cameras, I would say 80 to 90% of our res ed schools have some form of cameras. So their concern was, are you going to make us like do more? Are you going to say you have to get this type of camera? Which we're not. We're trying to learn and build off what are you doing for cameras, and somehow embed within our regulations around that. If you use cameras, here are some best practices. But their concern was, am I going to have to get rid of my whole camera system and like get a new one?
Right.
So when you start talking about new regs, that's one thing that comes up. Or now you have to go to a 1-to-3 ratio in every program. They're like, well, that's an unfunded mandate, and workforce is hard enough. So when I was talking earlier about, workforce and minimum age requirements, it comes from a best practice, and sometimes programs have said after, geez, I never thought about the delegation and placement of that staff person, given their age and the age of the
Right.
population, it probably would have been better there. So perhaps we need to do some guidance versus saying, no, you can't hire someone at this age, and take in those factors. But I would say workforce and unfunded mandates, as we go through this, that's always in the back of everyone's head. What are you going to put in there that's going to affect that?
Makes total sense, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
Thank you for doing this work. Childcare and early education is complicated, but this is like double that. I think you have two patients. I have to highlight the importance of the parents as patients as well. They are going through it as much as the child. Sometimes they don't know what's going on, and I think we don't control, as an agency, we don't control everything, but we do control the requirement of parents being informed, aware, and trained, because no program is forever. That parent is going to get that child back, and they need to know what to do, and they need to survive it. So I think the importance of having transition guidance for those children. Unfortunately, I have firsthand experience as a very young mother, and it was very, very difficult. I think, I'm triggered to say this because that was probably the one thing that was lacking for me. But we're survivors, and happy to report. But at the same time, it's very important that we recognize the family as also a patient.
Mm-hmm. Any other comments or questions? Thank you.
Excellent job. Thank
Great
you.
job, team.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you in September.
All right.
They're frequent flyers now. Yeah. I guess I just would thank the team very much for this work. We do look forward to having you back in September, and I just want to conclude by thanking the board for a really productive year, that we are ending our fiscal year of board meetings, and we have covered a lot of things this year and made an enormous amount of progress, and I remain just deeply grateful for your partnership, for your great questions, for your guidance, and for your leadership. I know there are a lot of things you could be doing with your time and talent, and so we're just really grateful that you're spending it here with us as we move this system forward. So thank you to the board members and to the amazing EUC team.
I'm going to continue the gratitude. I want to thank the team here at Walker for hosting us today. As I mentioned before, it is really important that we get out around to the state, and I couldn't think of a better backdrop for our last agenda item than this setting. So thank you to the team at Walker. And as the commissioner said, as we wrap up another fiscal year, I want to extend my thanks to the team behind the scenes and oftentimes in the scene that each and every month work to ensure that our meetings are on time, efficient, and most importantly, accessible to the public. The AV team, which is here every single month, making sure that we're being broadcast for people to watch. Our ratings have never been better. To our numerous host organizations across the Commonwealth, to Jackie, Chris, and Eugenia in the Commissioner's Office, thank you. To everyone from the department who takes the time to prepare all of us on a monthly basis with the board packet information needed to make thoughtful decisions and who come before us to present, thank you. Equally important to our decision-making is the voice of the field. To providers and leaders in the field, thank you for adding your voice through public comment and participation. And to my colleagues at this table, as the commissioner said, many of you have a lot of options with your time and you're choosing to spend it here, and just grateful to be a part of this team and grateful for your commitment to this work. And so I hope over the next couple of weeks, people find moments of sunshine to just don't plan anything on a Saturday, but find moments of sunshine to rest and recharge in service of your own well-being, but in service of this work as well. And so with that, I will make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Can I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Great. Thank you.